Okay, I have to test these. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, good evening. I'm so delighted to see all of you and welcome you back to the Coolidge Auditorium. This is really our first big event that we've had since COVID struck. So we are really glad to have you here and looking forward to kicking off a truly memorable year here at the library with this special pre-season event. And I do mean special. I mean, when you think about it, you're going to see a film, you're going to see several experts do a talking about Hazel Scott's life, a ballet, and a jazz trio. And we're going to be able to do that all in one program, so it's really going to be great. So joining me are our partners, Jenny Bilfield, the President and CEO of Washington Performing Arts. And Virginia Johnson, Artistic Director, Dance Theater of Harlem. So we three women represent arts organizations, but how did we end up standing in front of you on this stage? Well, the first piece of the puzzle was the donation of the papers and music of Hazel Scott to the Library of Congress by Hazel's son and one of our speakers tonight, Adam Clayton Powell III, who is actually back here, and maybe we can coax him out. There he is. I would especially like to acknowledge our gratitude to Adam Clayton Powell III in making it possible for this very significant collection to come to the library. For that, we are truly, truly grateful. And I hope that some of you had a chance to view the collection, which was drawn from nearly 4,000 items, including music, photographs, and letters, date books, and diaries. And we are so fortunate to be able to document her life as a pianist, a band leader, a film star, and a wife and a mother, and an ardent spokesman for civil rights. She's truly the whole package. So the second piece of the puzzle was an example of great minds think alike, and in that the Washington Performing Arts co-sponsored Sounds of Hazel, which uses ballet through the Dance Theater of Harlem to express the essence of Hazel Scott, an extraordinary artist who charted her own path as a musician whose legacy continues to grow and resonate. Tonight, we are celebrating Hazel Scott, and it will be fascinating for us to share with you a sneak peek at Sounds of Hazel, a new ballet honoring Hazel Scott that has been created by Dance Theater of Harlem. So now I'd like to introduce Virginia Johnson from Dance Theater of Harlem. Virginia is universally recognized as one of the great ballerinas of her generation, and she's here to talk a little bit about how this ballet came about. Virginia.
Thank you, Sue. It's wonderful to be here. You know, I'm a Washingtonian. I grew up here listening to concerts broadcast from the Coolidge Auditorium as a young person on WGMS, all these things from the long distance past. So it's very meaningful to be here. I want to express my profound thanks to the Library of Congress for this opportunity to be here and do this preview moment about the Hazel Scott Ballet, but also want to thank wonderful Washington Performing Arts and Adam Clayton Powell III for their wonderful impetus in making this work. I think that you're going to hear a lot about Hazel Scott tonight. I don't want to talk too much about it, But the thing is that the whole idea of somebody as vital and important and dynamic as Hazel Scott being unknown to me was shocking. And so I'm really thrilled that we have the opportunity to bring something, to participate in celebrating this amazing woman. At Dance Theater of Harlem, we really want to make sure that people understand what happens in art is something that is inspiring to people across the world. But art is something that we make, that we invent, that we put together. And it's our obligation to bring forward ideas, people, thoughts, practices that are not necessarily always the most celebrated, so that we can create a future that is stronger and more beautiful. So it is very wonderful to have this opportunity to participate in this event, and I'm now going to pass the baton over to Jenny Belfield, who is, of course, the CEO and Director of Washington Performing Arts.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know Sue mentioned the upcoming performance. It's actually the opening of our season on October 7th and 8th at the Harmon. So to see the world premiere of the complete ballet, please join us there. My colleagues have more information. It is a tremendous honor to be here and incredibly moving, because we have been anticipating this week for many years. We thought the week would happen in 2020. And of course it didn't, but we were just saying backstage that sometimes the additional time to develop and really marinate in an idea serves the work. Hazel Scott has inspired the best of artists, and we've seen this as people have discovered her work and her legacy over the past number of years. It's something that has become very important to Washington Performing Arts, as Virginia said, to remember people who had a crucial role in our American history, whose lives and work deserve to be better known. I was thinking about this a few weeks ago as I was in New York with my daughter, moving her into her first New York apartment on West 129th Street. And as we were running some errands, we passed by Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard and by the big office building, the building that is in that part of the city. And my daughter turned to me and said, "Oh, that name sounds familiar." And I said, "Yes, you've been at Adam Clayton Powell III's house." But her friend, and I said, he was Hazel Scott's husband. And then the friends were like, "Who's Hazel Scott? And who is that? Tell us more," because this was a new sort of sphere of names for them. And I was thinking at that moment that these moments where we have permanence in the forms of buildings and artworks and events like this that solidify a name or bring a name to greater awareness and then mark it in time, the importance of that can't be understated. So the fact that these archives, these treasured family archives, are now at the Library of Congress as part of our American history, with artworks and programs created and people like you experiencing this, is really remarkable, and it's important. It's very important at a moment when history is often vulnerable to being erased, and we need to take great care in every facet of what we do to make sure that it isn't. I want to acknowledge a tremendous partner in this who, although is not on stage, has had a remarkable and profound role in our Hazel Scott celebrations. It's the co-curator of this with Karen Chilton, our artist in residence, Murray Horwitz, who is celebrating a birthday today and is here. As I said, great art inspires the best, and sometimes it's that little spark of, there's a centenary coming up and we have to do something. And Hazel Scott was born a year before my mother was. My mother grew up in New York. She loved jazz. I bet she heard Hazel Scott perform. And so this lineage, the friendships, bringing it full circle to contemporary expression in the hands of incredible artists like Tiffany and Erica, whose work you'll see tonight, and then hopefully when you're with us in a week or so. This is what we live for, and we're really glad that you're here. So thank you. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for generosity. We have people here who've helped make this possible in many ways. The team, the patrons, the archivists. Thank you, and we will see you momentarily. Thank you, Sue.
Please welcome to the stage Hazel Scott, biographer, and tonight's panel moderator, Karen Chilton, along with Dance Theater of Harlem Artistic Director Virginia Johnson, Sounds of Hazel choreographer Tiffany Rea-Fisher, Hazel Scott's son, Adam Clayton Powell III, and the Library of Congress's Hazel Scott Archivist, Janet McKinney.
Thank you so much. And to the esteemed panel, thank you all for being here and thank you for joining us. Hazel Scott, she's the reason we're all here. Child prodigy, studied at the Juilliard School at 8 years old, hosted her own radio show at 14, starred on Broadway by 18, and by 19 she was a star. After her breakout performance at Cafe Society, New York's first integrated nightclub. So I'd love to start with why I began researching and writing the biography. I was struck by not only what she accomplished, but when she accomplished it. She was a star in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, a time when life in America for a Black American was truly difficult, and yet she persevered. She was one of the most sought-after talents in the entertainment industry, and at one point was one of the highest paid entertainers in Hollywood. After I began researching her, and I discovered all of these amazing accomplishments, I thought, but why was she lost in history? Why isn't there more written about her? Why don't we know more about her? And that led me to her son. So when I started researching the book, I told myself, if he says yes to this mad caper that I'm interested in, if he says yes, then I will go forward and write this book. And together, I think we came up with something really special, and I know for me, it was an extraordinary experience, unearthing her legacy and bringing her life and music to the public. So I start tonight's discussion with Adam. We're here to celebrate not only Dance Theater of Harlem's wonderful new piece, their wonderful new ballet, but also to acknowledge and celebrate Hazel Scott's archives here at the Library of Congress. So Adam, I remember when I first came to your house and we first started digging through your mother's papers. I remember seeing everything from old receipts to address books to concert programs and playbills, and you said, my mother is a pack rat. So I ask you now, was that in putting together her archive, was her being a pack rat, was that helpful? Did that make the job easier or more daunting?
Well, I don't believe we realized how much she saved until after she died and we went to her apartment, and there's all these boxes full of all of these clippings and all these other things. It was enormous. And there's some things that I knew, but there are lots of things I didn't know. And I remember your first reaction was, this is a biographer's dream. And then after you'd gone through it a bit, you said, this is a biographer's nightmare.
Because initially I was worried that there wouldn't be enough information. And then the more I started digging through the crates, as it were, I was like, this is extraordinary. So then what happens is it becomes a question of what do you keep in and what do you leave out? And as I was telling you backstage, there's still 100 pages of my book that I want back that my editor cut. But, you know, that's a marketing thing and dealing with publishers. So, but I never forgot that 100 pages. I thought it was all valuable. But I do know that, you know, this kind of work, this kind of archival work, you always end up finding something unexpected, like some little treasure. Did you find anything that caught you by surprise?
There were more than a few. Actually, one of them was, two of them, something I'm wearing right now, these cufflinks. Now, why did she save a pair of men's cufflinks that were a calendar from a certain date with a red jewel in a certain date? And then I eventually realized that's the day that my parents met, and she gave these to my father as a present.
Wow.
Another surprise was I knew that the U.S. government had stripped her of her citizenship in 1977. I know because she called me from Kennedy Airport where she was told that her passport was no longer valid and she couldn't enter the United States unless somebody sponsored her. So I had to go to Kennedy Airport to sponsor her coming into the country. And she was furious, and she said, first she said, I want all my taxes back. Then she said, okay, I can't have a US passport, I want a Trinidadian passport. And looking in the yellow pages, remember this is 1977, no Google, looking in the yellow pages, we couldn't find the Trinidadian consulate or mission to the UN. And I said, let's go to the British consulate, they certainly know where it is. And so we went to the British consulate, we go up the stairs to the central casting civil servant. He said, yes, madam, how can I help you? And my mother just began to sputter, she was so angry. I said, my mother has just been told that she's not a US citizen. Oh, really? And you need a passport. What's your birthday? And she said, I said, June 11th, 1920. 1920. And he opens up some book, and 1920. Oh, and you were born in Port of Spain, Trinidad. Yes. Ah, you were born a British subject. You shall have a British passport. Wow. And they gave her one that day. But what we didn't know, or I didn't know, until after she died, she also was a Swiss citizen. And she had a Swiss passport, which was and is a big deal. So finding that Swiss passport was a big surprise.
Wow. See, as the biographer, the work is never done. Like I still want to keep writing. I can't stop. Her life and music, it was all so fascinating and interesting. Now, Hazel grew up in Harlem, and I just think, that's where she cut her teeth, and it's so apropos that Dance Theater of Harlem is the company that is now honoring her with this wonderful new piece, Sounds of Hazel. So Virginia, I want to ask you, when you first discovered Hazel Scott, it's a twofold question. What inspired you most about her? And then more specifically, what part of her journey did you think would be translated or communicated best through dance?
It's a great question. First, I have to say, your book was the beginning of this. When Jenny spoke to me about doing a work to celebrate Hazel Scott, and I didn't know who she was, it was your book that took me on the journey of finding out and made me hungry to know more. This is an amazing artist, and why do we not know this woman? But I think the thing that really struck the chord for me was that she was such a gifted artist, and she started off by understanding and being able to work in as a classical pianist. Mm-hmm. She studied at Juilliard, she had all this behind her, but people did not want to know that about her. They didn't see a young black girl from Trinidad as a classical artist. But look what she did. She took her skill, she took her talent, and she made it something that drew people in and taught people that you may have this color skin or that color skin. You have these gifts, and you have a way to communicate with the world and bring people together through your art. She was such a vital artist, and she was constantly creating ways for people to access that art, whether it was as a pianist, as a singer, as an actor in the screen. She was creating possibilities that nobody else could have done without the skills that she had. So that was really inspiring to me. It is very much what Dance Theater of Harlem has been about from the very beginning, is telling people, if you've got this talent, you have to have the opportunity to develop it and the opportunity to use it, to create a change in people's minds about what their expectations are of what's happening on the stage. And that's exactly what Hazel Scott did throughout her whole life. So it felt like the right project for Dance Theater of Harlem.
Now, once you began studying Hazel and going through all of the research and thinking about what a new work would feel like and look like. How did you go about selecting the choreographer?
Yes, that was a little bit of serendipity, because it was shortly after the idea of a ballet came to mind that I got to see a work. I was at an International Association of Ballet of Dance conference, and I was watching the conference, I was watching the performance, and they were all exciting and pretty dynamic. And then there was a piece, and it was a contemporary work, but it was on point. And there was something about the way that the choreographer had asked the dancer to embody the idea that she was expressing, using point shoes, using this contemporary movement, but still based in that on the tips of your toes feeling. I thought, wow, that's an interesting work. So I was asking, who's that choreographer? And it actually turned out to be Tiffany Rea-Fisher. And so when Hazel Scott came to mind, Tiffany came to mind, because this is somebody who understood what it was to communicate an idea through formal movement, had the skills to do it, had the sophistication to do it, but had the creativity also to do it. So I knew that if I asked Tiffany, I wouldn't be getting a laundryless ballet, I'd be getting something very distinctive.
So Tiffany, once you learned of Hazel Scott, can you also speak to what resonated with you about her life, her music, her journey as an artist, and how you used that information to inform this new ballet?
Yeah, absolutely. Just piggybacking on what everyone has already said, the idea that the ballet was coming from Classical Theater of Harlem was really exciting to me, because that's where Hazel blossomed. That's where she was like rooted. And that it was with Dance Theater of Harlem under Virginia was another like, ooh, because I had been looking up to Virginia my entire life. So that was really very exciting. And I'm a firm believer that you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And so I saw that in Hazel's life, right? She was a pianist, she was a singer, she was an actor, she was a TV personality, she was an activist, she was a mother, she was a mentor, she was all of these things. And she embodied that. She literally would change the spaces that she was in simply by her presence. And so to be able to represent that, something so positive, and my artistic practice is rooted in joy. And when you see Hazel Scott perform, it's like, it's the most joyful thing. You can't help but smile and move. So one, there's movement built in, because she's extremely physical when she plays. So that was really wonderful. But
I always said that nobody was having more fun than her.
Oh, truly. True. I mean, it's so wonderful. And I think sometimes too, with ballet, people feel that you have to watch it like this and you have to kind of be away. And it's like, no, you can engage, you can clap, you can smile, you can really enjoy this art form. And so that's what I wanted to bring. It was that joy of her spirit, of being able to change for the better, but without the of it. It was like, we are going to change this with a smile, and you're gonna do what I ask, because I'm Hazel Scott, with a smile. It's like really, really amazing. So that, and then the artists too that Virginia has assembled in her company, we did a 2-day workshop just to see if we vibed with each other. Because we're doing something very intimate. I'm asking everything of them. I'm gonna give my everything, but I'm asking everything of you. So it really needs to make sense. And we were all deeply in love by day 2. So it worked out really well.
Well, talk about your collaboration with your composer, who is also here tonight, Erica Lewis Blunt.
Yes, she's right there in the pink.
I'm always interested in the collaborative journey. As a writer, I collaborate with a pianist who some of you may know, Damian Sneed. We've written an opera together. We're working on another one. And I know what our collaborative process is. We do a lot of talking initially, and then we go off to our mutual corners and leave each other alone, and then we come back together and tell each other how brilliant we are. That's how we roll.
That's a good process. I should try that.
I'm just wondering, how do you and Erica collaborate? Because this wasn't your first collaboration, right?
No, we've been collaborating for 5 years, and we are like glued at the hip. So Erica's in every rehearsal with me. So we meet up at my house. We live like 2 blocks from each other. We talk about the process as we get to rehearsal. We're in rehearsal together. We walk home, continuing to talk about the process.
You all really like each other.
Oh yeah, we do. It's a deep love, which is helpful. But I think one of the things that I like working with Erica is that she can work in real time. So I was working with Dance Theater of Harlem, and we were doing the Trinidad section, and I was like, something is off. Something's missing. And I was like, I need to hear Trinidad. I was like, can I have some waves? I need to hear the ocean. And she was like, sure. And so the drums are going, and then all of a sudden there's ocean, and the dancers are like, ooh. And it's like, yeah, like that. It's really exciting because I'm working in real time. So to have a musician that's working in real time with us, it pulls us all closer together, and it keeps us all on the same page. You know, at no point is there a mystery of like what's going on. So that for us at least works well. I don't work with all of my collaborators that way, but Erica and I, it seems the closer that we are together, there's no room for like misinterpretation, because we were both there with myself, with the composers, with the dancers, with Hazel in the room, right? So that has been lovely. And then what I had asked and what I had proposed to Virginia is that we go to places that were geographically significant in Hazel's life. So we start in Trinidad. We move to Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. We have her speaking about what it is to be an American during the McCarthy era. And then we move to Paris. And so each of those has such a different sound that was helpful for Erica, I think. And then for me, movement-wise, like how you're moving, if you're thinking about going to a party in Trinidad, is very different than a stroll down the Champs-Élysées, right? Like, so that was very helpful from a movement perspective.
That was one of the questions that I had too, was how you came up with the title of the ballet. Because I was thinking sounds, you know, I'm thinking that's auditory, but when I think of dance, I think of something very visual, very visceral. And so how do you, you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. Well, first, I'm terrible with titles. So it is not a strong suit for mine, and I like to crowdsource. I like to bring people in. So I speak, before we go into rehearsal, I talk to the dancers about like what I'm struggling with, what's going on, and I told them, I was like, we need a ballet. We need a name for this ballet. I have some ideas, but I'm not loving any of them. If you could take some time and think about what this piece evokes for you, and I put the same task out for Erica, and actually Daphne, who you saw, she named the piece. She sent me some things, and she sent me a couple of different ones, and I pulled everything together, and I sat with all of the names for a while, and Sounds of Hazel just kept coming to the top. And so I text Daphne, and I was like, you won the contest. Like, you got it. But I just thought it was so beautiful, because I do, even though it is a ballet, there's something sonic. Like, she was a musician. So I think we had to lead with the music.
That makes sense. One of the most extraordinary experiences that I had when I was writing the biography was working with librarians and archivists, which brings me to Janet McKinney. It was invaluable working with archivists. I mean, I could not have written the kind of book that I wanted to write without that very measured, focused, you know, attention to detail, that pragmatism. And I'll share one of the experiences I had. I spent a lot of time at the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University. I was camped out there, it felt like every day. And there was this wonderful archivist there who would see me, and she would just sort of slip things on the table and say, you should look at that. And then one day she brought this big box, and she just sort of dropped it in front of me and said, I think you'll like what's in there. And I opened it up, and it was a box full of letters that Hazel had written to the great Mary Lou Williams, jazz pianist and composer, who was one of her best friends. So I lost my mind. So I'm going through these letters, and I'm reading each one, and I'm touching them, and I'm going. She says, we don't have that much time. Listen, go to the copy machine, Xerox all of these letters. They'll still be here. Just get to the copy machine. We're only open until 7, okay? But it was that kind of care that I always felt Archivist had. And I just wonder, Janet, with all of Hazel's materials now landing in your hands. What was your process? What is that process, that archival process? Because it feels overwhelming, but I just wonder, how do you disseminate? How do you categorize? How do you prioritize?
Well, how many hours do we have to talk about that? The first thing that I do with any archival collection that I work on is research. I research as much as possible. You need to know as much as possible about the person, the creator, the organization. So I consulted this book by Karen Chilton, which was a wonderful resource, and I read all of your notes looking at the Mary
Thank
Lou
you.
Williams
There was
letter.
almost 1,000. I appreciate that somebody cared
The notes are
about the source
important.
notes. That's right.
So after I do research, to do really broad strokes, you survey, you arrange, and then you describe. So you survey the broad contents of the collection, see what is there, how much of it is there, what's missing. Are there any preservation concerns? And I write a processing plan, how I think things might be arranged, and we take into, what's really important to take into consideration is how the creator arranged it. Did she have her files arranged in a certain way or not? Was there no organization? And after that, we describe it in what's called a finding aid, and its purpose is in the name. It aids researchers in finding what they're looking for, because these are what we refer to in the music division as special collections. They're not our general collections. You know, published books, published scores have catalog records. They're cataloged individually, and you can go to any library in the country and it's basically the same. But these are unique, one-of-a-kind items, and we can't catalog every scrap of paper that Hazel Scott touched. So we create a finding aid so that researchers know where the correspondence is and the business papers are, and all of the photographs, and they know how to ask for it when they come to us. And hopefully we do as good a job here at the library as the wonderful experience you had at Rutgers.
Was there anything that struck you? Was there anything, like, in that methodology, are you ever sort of struck personally by any one piece of an artifact, or is there something that sort of stops you in your tracks where you recognize, oh, this is really special?
Absolutely, all the time. It's very frustrating being an archivist because, you know, I'm a music historian, I have a music history degree, and I would love to just sit there and read every scrap of paper, every letter, but that's not what they're paying me to do. But, you know, obviously sometimes you can't help yourself, and yeah, that happens all the time.
I wanted to ask Adam, this is sort of an archival question. There's that wonderful story that you told me when you found a receipt of your mother's that was for, I think it was a bank in Paris. And then you went to Paris, and then you went to this bank, and you can take it from there. It's a great story. It's in the book.
There was a receipt, again, from a bank where I know she had an account, had an account, and went to Paris. And at least this part of the bank, there were no computers. Everything was in manual ledgers. And, you know, je suis le fils de Madame Scott. Oh, oui, Madame Scott. Oh, oui. And she had what I thought was a safe deposit box. What it was when they finally brought it out, a gray cardboard enclosure with a cover of some sort on it. And so I open up the cover, and there are these jewels, which had been made for her by Harry Winston, sitting in this gray cardboard box. And so then the question was, Okay, do I just walk through customs with this? Now, when I was growing up, and my mother was in Paris, and she would send requests for things. She would say, "Oh, I have to have my Jones Brothers sausage at Thanksgiving." Okay, and she said, "My furs. I need my furs. They're here." You know, and so I was at that time. I would have been maybe 10 or 11 years old, and so, and in those days, maybe they still do. The French had a very, very high tariff on furs and other, luxury items. So I got off the plane at Orly Airport, and I put all of her furs in, interestingly enough, a gray cardboard box. And my mother is like where that wall is, watching me go through customs. And so she's there, at the railings of watching. She knows what's in the box. And so I get to the customs inspector, and just a moment, ça. And I said, "Oh, there's some old clothes for my mother." "Oh, okay." Which they were.
Adam, I always thought of your mother as intellectually curious, an artist who wasn't just interested in music. She was interested in lots of things. I remember somewhere in her journal, she said, "Oh, I'd love to write more poetry. I'd love to write an opera. I want to write sacred music." So I think of us sitting here now with this wonderful choreographer of this new ballet. What would she think of having a ballet created in her honor?
I've actually thought of that often, and I think she would be amazed, obviously pleased. One person said, she might say, "It's about time."
And she loved to dance, too. I remember there was one concert at the Copacabana where she said she danced for 15 or 20 minutes or something before she sat down to play. And she considered herself a very good dancer. So if she were here, she may want to be part of the ballet, Hazel being Hazel.
Would be immediately cast.
Okay.
Yes.
Virginia, Sounds of Hazel is, of course, going to debut here in Washington. And I know it's going to Charleston, Seattle, then it will end up in New York. What is your goal for the ballet? What is the dream for this piece?
So one of the things that I really hope that this ballet does is start a madness for Hazel Scott. And I hope that it's going to be a ballet that stays on our repertoire for a very long time. The thing about Dance Theater of Harlem is that we're a touring company. So unlike most companies that have residencies in a city and they do a cycle of ballets, because we go to many cities around the country and around the world, we want to take these tidbits of information, of history, of inspiration to many different places. So I would like to see this ballet performed in many cities across the world and around the country.
Absolutely. And on that high note, I would love to open up the room for questions. We have a few minutes where we can do some Q&A, so if anyone wants to ask any of us anything, we're here for it.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I thank the panel for coming. This is wonderful. I'd like to first thank the biographer. Is your book available here tonight? That's my first question.
I don't think the book is available tonight, but it is on Amazon.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about having a university press publish the book, they're low on the funds, but they're big on scholarship. And so they've kept the book in print all of these years because the book is now 10 years old. I was telling Adam, I said, this is a numerologist's dream. Hazel turned 100 in 2020, and the book turned 10. So the fact that the book is still available is really gratifying because it was a long time in coming. It wasn't a book that every publisher wanted to publish. I was turned down by everybody, named them, and they turned me down. I mean, it was close to almost 50 publishers I went through to get the book done because I was told nobody's interested in books about jazz, Nobody's interested in books about women, and they're really not interested in jazz women. So, but here we are. So to answer your question, thank you so much.
My second quick question was, there's a re-interest in vinyl records now that's very, very huge around the world, and I was wondering if Mr. Adam can speak to the vinyl catalog, whether it's personal or elsewhere.
The vinyl availability of vinyl records of Hazel's.
The availability of my mother's recordings is far beyond my knowledge, and the reason is that at one point somebody, I remember it was Mike Solid, who said, do you know that the bookstore at Harvard Square is selling your mother's record? I had no idea that this was Relaxed Piano Moods. I had no idea the record had been re-released. And Dizzy Gillespie was alive at the time. And I said, you know, they're bringing out these records of my mother around midnight, Relaxed Piano Moods, and they're not notifying the estate, let alone checking with any ASCAP rights. And then Dizzy said, they do that to me all the time, and I'm still alive. So there are lots of them out there, but and we're trying to track them down.
Yeah. I've got a few in my closet. I mean, that was just part of my research, but that was all eBay, you know, like just finding old record dealers on eBay and paying all kinds of crazy money for, you know, records from the 40s. But some of the CDs are available. But I think if you do a little search on the internet, you can find a few records and hope they show up in one piece. See, that's the problem there.
So interested in the music. Did you use any of Hazel's recordings, and if so, what did you use?
So the score for the ballet is a composite score. So there are 3 pieces. There's 2 musical pieces of Hazel's, and then there's one of her speaking that I put movement to text, and then the other 3 pieces are Erica. So it's a composite score of like sounds, this like kind of a sonic journey, but also it was important to us, even though we didn't want to do an exact biopic, that Hazel Scott show up as Hazel Scott in the ballet. So Flying Fingers, which is the piece that you saw Daphne perform to, that is a Hazel Scott piece.
Any other questions?
I'm writing an essay on Hazel Scott for school, and I was wondering, I have a list of questions that I wanted to ask you. I wanted to know how you thought Hazel created an image of representation for Black girls and women in America, either today or then, however you think she impacted Black girls.
Oh, I think she's such an extraordinary example of talent, grace, integrity, intellect, then and now. I think one of the things that struck me early on was the fact that she was 8 years old, a child prodigy. You don't see or hear these stories about little Black girl child prodigies running around the Juilliard School in 1928. Because it was also not only the idea that she was a little Black girl, it was the idea that she was a girl. Because when you research the Juilliard School that early on, the school was almost entirely male. So I think that she was a person who may not have intended to break all of those barriers, but because of just the force of who she was as an artist and as a person and her belief in herself, she continued to do that throughout her career. A lot of people now speak of her as an activist. That's the label that she's given, but that was not a label that she gave herself. I think there's a quote where she says, you know, I don't need the activist tag, because to her, it wasn't so much about the label. It wasn't about being called, you know, a prodigy, an activist, trailblazer. It was about doing it and being it. So for her, activism was, I have a platform. There's all this stuff going down in the country that's affecting my people. So I have to say something. So it was more a natural compulsion than, oh, credit me as this. It was, it's interesting because her years in Hollywood, I think is sort of a metaphor that she insisted that she would never play a character name. Her character would always be Hazel Scott as herself in every film, and I think that sums it up in a great way. Yeah, we can hear you.
I have a question for you, Adam Clayton III. Adam Clayton Powell III. My question is, your parents were both stars. One in the political realm, one in the theatrical, musical, realms. How did two people who were ambitious, successful, get along on a personal basis?
Well, amazingly, and it's more amazing the more I look back on it, they tried to have our home life be as normal as possible. This was a different time. There weren't entourages, there weren't bodyguards. We lived in a house. Next door was a dentist. Across the street was somebody who ran a dry cleaners. So it was a different kind of a setting. But at the same time, I knew that my mother was different because, she went off. One of my earliest memories, I guess I was about 4 years old. I would go with her if it was on a Friday. She would commute down to a TV studio and have her own TV show with Charlie Mingus and Max Roach behind her. That was Mom. But of course, I was 4 years old, so I was really interested in Captain Video's spaceship over there. Same with my father. The three of us would eat dinner together. What they would do is they would post in the kitchen carbon copies, there were no Xeroxes yet, carbon copies of their travel schedules. So that when they were out of town, I knew exactly where they were. And, okay, my mother is performing today in Minneapolis, and then she's taking Northwest Airlines. Northwest Airlines, what's that? Every Saturday, and again, this seems more remarkable to looking back on it, because this is before jet aircraft. Every Saturday morning when I got up, the two of them were there. And Saturday was our day. And we would play touch football in the street. Now, there are no other mothers playing touch football in the street. And so since she was the only non-guy on the street, all the guys would try to go after her. Now remember, her hands are insured by Lloyd's of London for $1 million. So she had this move that today you see. I remember watching Joe Montana do this for the San Francisco 49ers. That's my mother's move, where he sort of tucks his hands under, so he's protecting his hands. That was her move. They would come after her. So it was crazy, and actually, I didn't really understand how important my father was. I learned to type in his office. I would type address envelopes. But I didn't really understand how important he was until 1954, so I would have been 7 or 8. They let me stay up late to watch the 11 o'clock news on a school night. Wow, what's going on? I knew my father had been away somewhere. And so the 11 o'clock news in New York was on the NBC station, was anchored by somebody named John K.M. McCaffrey. And he had this very stilted style. He'd say, "What kind of a day has it been? It's been a day that Dwight Eisenhower told the Russians that he would never, told the Soviets." And so on this occasion, everybody used to make fun of John K. McCaffrey. So on this occasion, at 11 o'clock at night, "What kind of a day has it been? It's been a day when Adam Clayton Powell returned from Bandung to a hero's welcome." the first item on the news. Yeah. Dad. Wow. So their attempt to make life as normal as possible worked pretty well.
Thank you to this wonderful panel, and thank you all for joining us.
And thank you, Karen.